Welcome everybody to another AZ Ray video. Today we're going to talk about the film Nosferatu. But in order to understand that film, we need to talk about vampire history. There was a lot of vampire lore that's existed across the world for thousands of years. The whole idea of vampires didn't start from Bram Stoker's Dracula, nor does it start from the film Nosferatu. It actually starts in various countries and regions in the world, right? For example, the Ancestria and the Empusa are vampire-like stories that exist in Greece. You have the Aluga leeches in the Hebrew Bible. Aluga is like a way of saying leeches. And Lilith is also someone that's in the Hebrew Bible. She also has like owl-like features. Not all vampires transformed into bats. There was other various creatures that they transformed in, but often owls or bats. Those are like the main ones. And then you have Bulgarian vampires, which are believed to have origins from children of Judas, right? And then you have Strigoi, which were the Middle Ages vampires that existed. And then you have the Ashwangs, which have Malaysian and Indonesian origins, which they're kind of cool. Long libs and ash-like faces. They were also believed to control like hordes of crocodiles. So an interesting ability. Those practices of the Ashwings would spread to India and Mesopotamia due to the boat trade. You also have the Diwali festival, which has Hindu origins, but also believed to maybe have some connections with the Ashwangs. You also have the Bhuta spirits also seek flesh. You see these phenomenons of seeking flesh. Lamashtu was a vampire queen god that feasted on women, unwanted fetuses, believed to be like the origins of miscarriages and unwanted children. So we start seeing these patterns, right? And then we start to think, okay, so why? Why are all these phenomenon going all across the world, right? Why do we have all these different vampiric-like creatures? People of those various time periods are trying to make sense of the world, right? They're trying to make sense of various diseases, abnormalities, unacquainted love. They were also trying to understand prejudice and racism. And there was also a big movement with the LGBTQ non-binary movements. And it was a way of talking about these topics without having to be direct about it, especially when it comes to the LGBTQ rights. For example, Carmilla is a great Irish folk story that actually predates Bram Stoker's Dracula. And it is a lesbian love story. Definitely check it out. And it is an example of unacquainted love, because when you see the encounters of a vampire, they're very romantic. As far as the various diseases that people were trying to make sense of, there was rabies, which makes you aggressive, and even in modern medicine they're still struggling. There was cholera that was going on. There was flu epidemic. We had, various outbreaks. You had the Black Plague. You had all these crazy diseases that people were trying to make sense of. And there was also porphyria was also a disease which left you with like red blotchy skin. And it was an epidemic that left you like very euphoric. There was also, some psychological problems that were happening as well. So people were trying to make sense of that. And then another thing as well is that blood from goats and livers from various animals have been used since the 5th century, and they've been used in places like Babylonia and Rome, and there's lots of medical documents that prove that these things help people with different forms of like blindness, especially due to the vitamin A elements of it. And so there's all these patterns with like blood and savagery that's like starting to repeat itself. And so we start understanding, okay, people were trying to make sense of the world around them. And then as far as the history of how we got to Nosferatu, right? We see various, mythologies. We see things that are spreading out more in various regions. These start in the English language with Samuel Toy Coolidge, and that eventually brings us to John William Polidori and Lord Byron, and then that would eventually just to Bram Stoker. There was also another great epic from Serbia, After 90 Years. All that connects with Bram Stoker's Dracula. And then we see these phenomenons happen, and then we start seeing how this idea and this romanticism spreads. Evidence too that people actually did these vampire huntings. Archaeologists actually recently uncovered a woman that was actually murdered with a giant scythe across her chest. And she's from the 1700s, and she's from Poland, right? Which is not too far from like the Romanian regions and various like Slavic regions that have other belief systems that I didn't get into, like the Werdulak, right? So you see all these different origins. And yeah, I didn't get into all of them. There's like a bunch of other things I didn't get into. There's like various Japanese yokai that are also similar. You also see, I believe the character's name was Grendel from Beowulf, that also has vampiric-like features. He's believed to be the descendant from Cain, which is the famous original betrayer that killed Abel. And that brings us to Nosferatu. Nosferatu is a film that does an amazing job of talking about the history of the time, the gloom of the time, the disease of the time, and people trying their best to make sense of it. Nosferatu is not a love story. It's a tragic story, right? We see Lord Orlok trying to survive, trying to do deceitful things just to simply exist. And in his existence, a shadow starts to loom. And that is how he's referenced throughout the film, as this shadow. And the shadow that can't exist with the light. And then we see a series of events, a series of victims. And of course, our main female actress is arguably the one that deals with the most pain in this film. She's arguably the most victim, and we see the patterns repeating themselves in all these different folklore stories. The victims of these are often women, or women are often the vampires. And, as we stated, there's diseases, unacquainted love, LGBTQI, non-binary, that's also taking place. And then we have all these like mixture of things that are happening simultaneously. We see tragedy and death. I don't want to get too much into the plot. As far as like spoilers, definitely check out the film. I highly recommend it. I just wanted to give you guys like historical context so you can better appreciate what's happening in the film. Ellen, the main character, is a victim from the start. She's even referred to as a Lilith, which previously mentioned is also connected to these various vampire origins, right? And as I gave you all these historical examples, it's all tragedies. They're all sad. People getting killed just because they had a disease already. Pretty sad. People being killed because they had some kind of abnormality or disability. Unacquainted love. LGBTQ, non-binary and whatnot. And then like obvious connotations of people like women have been taken advantage of for a long time. And then there's the other part of it that I haven't touched on yet, which is racism. There's a lot of academics that have been talking about how the way Orlok is depicted is very anti-Semitic, right? We see some elongated features. He has like a large nose, large ears, long claws, associated with like filth or dirtiness. And I've heard both sides of the debate, and I would say that it is anti-Semitic. Whether it's intentional or non-intentional, if you think about how German in the Western world was at that time, it was very anti-Semitic in the 1950s. Jews were scapegoated as well as Freemasons, as I mentioned in another video. And they were scapegoated often as the reason for problems, unemployment, various financial scandals. So there was a big sentiment. anti-Semitism. So even if the film's intention wasn't to be anti-Semitic, it became an extension of anti-Semitism. And so we have all this like resentment, guilt, and tragedy that ends up happening. And leads to the way the film ends. It was never going to be a happy end. There's never going to be a beautiful end to a story with a demon. There's always going to be casualties. People are always going to lose a lot in the process. But in that path, that's what also makes the film very enjoyable. Because the director, Eggers, does an amazing job of just explaining 1830s, how Germany was, and how hard life was. And then you have like the obvious like devil and demon connotations. You have the introductions of Romanian travelers or gypsies in the film. And then you have the introduction of various ideas in French medicine. They even bring up alchemy, which is arguably a precursor for science itself. And then it also touches on spirituality. Is all this stuff real? Is this possible? Is it valid? Once you start doing research, there's different concepts and like hive mind mentalities that psychological studies talk about, and how communities and people can form a collective mentality, a collective perception, a collective understanding of things. And on some level is real. And hysteria can form that way through a collective of people being freaked out about an idea. And it also, a collective of people can also come together to try to combat it. We see this binary battle between good and evil in this film. And why I think the film is so successful is because it does a great job of taking you through the journey of everybody. And everybody deals with tragedy. There's no winners in this film. And I think the moral of that, it's a scapegoat. Nosferatu is a scapegoat. I honestly think that's why Nosferatu was such a fantastic old film from the 1920s. It's artistically great. It was so well filmed. There's a lot of rich color into it. And it played with different color filters. You'll see different like sepia tones, blue tones, green tones. It was very artistically done. And the image was just so haunting. It's very iconic. And then there's also the obvious Dracula connection. This film definitely merges both mythologies, right? And the casting of it was also well done, right? You have the Renfield actor and Nicholas Hoult playing a similar character in this film. And you have Willem Dafoe in this Von Helsing-like role, which is pretty cool because he played both Dracula and Van Helsing, which is very neat. And because this film is centered on tragedy and the connection within Dracula and whatnot, which I'm happy that it did do the connection, because even the old 1920s films gives credit to Dracula. There is a connection to it, and there is a tragedy to it, right? And it's like being immortal, living a long time, the depression that helps, and the fact that like you need a blood as a necessity to survive, because all these various regions, right? Unacquainted love, LGBTQ, diseases, and all this is just like, it's not a fulfilled life. It's not a happy life. And then it's also like, if you want to analyze the demon's perspective, did they get a choice? Or were they forced to become this? Going back to the history and going back to the film, we see how all this is just connected into this very tragic event. And then the final point, right? The obvious sexuality that's in all these vampire stories. The vampire bite. It's very intimate. It's very close, right? Often by the neck. Connects to your heart. It's incredibly sexual. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. In these various depictions, Nosferatu, not just this version, but there's other two versions of this as well. There's an Italian one as well. I believe Herzog did one of them. And the Italian director, it's not coming to my brain right now. But there's all these accounts of just loneliness and tragedy and trying to find love and connection. And no, it's not done in a healthy way. It's done in a very malicious way, manipulative way, horrendous way, often without the victim's consent. As far as my rating for this film, I would have to give this film an 8.5 out of 10. It did a phenomenal job when it came to the horror, the realism, the historical tellings of it. The characters were all well done and balanced. Every character played a role in the film itself. The reason I wouldn't get the 9 is because I feel like to get a 9, the film has a strong range of emotions, and the film, in my opinion, falls short of it. It almost made me sad. It was close to getting me sad. It was, but it did achieve some other high notes. There's moments of humor, there's moments of hope, there's moments of tragedy, and then you're getting sucked into this amazing roller coaster ride. I think the message of this film is that no person should have to go through those lengths to feel pleasure and joy. And when I mean both of those people, I mean Lily Rose Depp's character in Ellen, as well as Skarsgård's character in Orlok, right? No vampire, no Dracula, no Orlok. No person should go through that much travesty and pain and lengths just to live a life of love and pleasure and joy and romance. I think that's the message of the film. Definitely check this film out. Vampires are definitely cool. I'm not trying to say don't like vampires. I'm just giving you historical context behind vampires and giving you my honest take on them, However you fall for your vampire lore, that's completely up to you guys. Definitely check it out. You will definitely enjoy it. Thank you for checking out another AZ Ray video. Spread the word. Share it to your mama, your papa, your sister, your mister, your enemies, your neighbors, and always read the comment section. Check out the community/posts tab. Leave your thoughts, give me your feedback, give me suggestions for things that you want to see. Hope you guys have an amazing end of the year on this unique Christmas dark tale, and stay safe out there. And thanks for checking out another AZ Ray video.